Riding your e-mounted bike in winter probably means colder, wetter, dirtier, slower rides that can be really good fun, but you're probably going to be riding in some pretty awful conditions. So how do you get your e-mountain bike winter ready? There are two aspects to this. The first one is performance, to make sure your bike is as good as possible, but also as much fun to ride as you can make it. And the next one is protection, to make your bike durable and make sure it comes out in spring, not looking like it's been dumped in a river all winter. All right, step one is tyres. It's so important for the way your bike rides. If you're living somewhere like the UK in winter, where it gets soft, bit of an understatement there, it gets very muddy, going for a mud tyre or something with deeper tread that's more widely spaced is really going to help you out. The spacing means that the tyre is going to clear, it's not just going to get full of mud. Basically then your tyre is mud, riding on mud, which does not grip. So it needs to be able to clear, but also the deeper tread is going to dig in and get into that soft material and make your bike grip, but also make it way more fun to ride in sloppy conditions. I'm running Pirelli Scorpion S tyres. These are e-mountain bike specific, but it's the S bit that tells you it's soft. So pick your favourite brand, check out their tyres, their websites, or even their packaging will tell you the sort of conditions it's designed for. And definitely I would go for the kind of mixed to soft or mud conditions end of the scale. It's basically going to tell you the type of tread that's on there, how deep it is, how widely spaced it is. I've also got the Hyperwall, so a decent amount of protection in the sidewalls of these tyres, because you don't want to be fixing punctures when your hands are freezing cold. Having that tougher sidewall or a decent construction of tyre as well also means it's safer to run the lower pressures. You're probably going to be riding a bit slower. The average speeds come down in winter because of the conditions. And that does mean you can get away with lower pressures. I kind of tend to run mine in the low 20 psi, so probably 22 front, 24 rear. Still relatively firm compared to some riders, but yeah, it just means that I've got the protection. I'm not going to be smashing into that rim, and I get the benefit of the extra grip. The generally lower speeds in wintertime when it's super boggy actually sometimes mean you can run your suspension softer as well, because you're not going to be hitting those edges quite as hard, like I said, with the tyres. But bear in mind that on those really sloppy rides, you're going to get covered in mud, as is your bike. So you're going to get heavier anyway. So that probably is going to affect how much sag and how soft your bike feels. So you don't necessarily need to go softer with the air pressures or the springs. You can think about lightening up the dampening on your suspension as well. So maybe taking a couple of clicks off the dampening, or even going a bit more linear. If you've got volume spacers in your forecourt shock, you might be able to take one of those out in those slower conditions. Next up is controls and contact points, so grip, saddle and pedals. So putting a fresh set of grips on for winter might be really nice. If you're anything like me, it's cold outside, you're going to wear some thicker gloves, although I do prefer thinner ones. I just get too cold, so I do wear thicker gloves. You might want to think about running a thinner diameter set of grips then, just to sort of even that out. Make sure you're gripping nicely. Soft compound ones as well can be really nice in winter. Like I say, thicker gloves, keep those hands working. It's not much fun to ride in winter when your hands are freezing cold. And then your saddle, that can get really covered in mud, particularly if your bum's covered in mud, you're sliding around all over it. So if you don't have one already, an e-mountain bike specific saddle with that nice kick up at the back is super helpful for climbing, but also in the muddy conditions, you're not going to slide around as much. I have seen people tape or zip tie bits of old tyre to them so you don't slip around at all, but for me that makes it too grippy. I don't like that. Flat pedals are really good in winter conditions as well. You're going to be sliding around a bit, so it's nice to be able to dab nice and quickly, but making sure you've got a really good combination of pedals and shoes to be super grippy is really important when conditions are really slippery. All right, now on to a couple of tips hopefully going to keep you out on the trails a bit longer in winter. First one is Mudguards. Now I run a nice fork mounted short one all year round because they're super neat and they work in all conditions. But when it comes to really bad winter wet riding conditions, I'll run one of the big front Mudguards, mainly for vision, so I'm not getting stuff up in my face all the time. Rear mudguards, now it depends on the design of your bike. You can get these kind of small ass saver types that go on to the saddle, or a big full-blown mudguard that mounts to the rear of the bike. That is going to work really well to keep you and the bike sort of dry as much as anything. But to be honest, I kind of just stick with the front one more for performance. In really wet and cold conditions, it's a really good idea to swap from organic brake pads over to sintered. They're going to work really well without having to get as hot as the organic ones, but just make sure you bed them in nicely before you ride. Otherwise, sometimes you can wear through them quite quickly, especially in horrible conditions. But they will make your brakes work a lot better in the cold, wet, horrible conditions. All right, finally, let's think about how to protect your lovely e-bike from the winter conditions. Number one is try and make it slippery as possible so that mud doesn't stick to it. That will make your bike a lot heavier, but also it'll start wearing your bike and scratching it as well. So silicone spray like this PT's Protect and Shine is great at doing this. Number one rule with this stuff is to not spray it onto your brakes, because that'll make them slippery as well and they won't work. It'll contaminate the pads. So the best way of doing this is probably to spray it onto a rag. If you're going to put it onto some of the bigger surfaces, like the bottom of your frame particularly, makes it lovely and shiny, but also, like I said, stops that mud from sticking. And also, if you can get into nooks and crannies of your bike, places like on those motor fins, but be super careful about where you spray it. It's important to keep your battery contacts clean and dry. Silicone grease is good for the rubber boots and O-rings, keeping everything nice and waterproof and reducing corrosion. Make sure your battery contacts are dry with a microfiber cloth, and some people use a contact cleaner, but these are to be treated with care. They shouldn't be over applied and are designed to be used once every few months. Use a penetrating lube to keep the locking mechanism lubed up so it doesn't seize in the cold, wet weather and leave you with a dead battery stuck inside your bike. Having a clean chain that is well lubed at the start of a ride is going to significantly reduce the wear in the winter conditions, particularly on an e-bike when you're putting significant watts through that drivetrain. Having a chain lube is going to last your ride will make a big difference. It can be really good to try and fill some of the gaps on your bike so that they don't get filled up with mud, make your bike heavy, but also wear away the paint. So some racers use this thing called Moto Foam. I've actually found this bit of foam in my garage. It's come out of a toolbox. So I'm going to slice a bit of this up just to fill in this gap at the back of my swing arm. Stop that from filling up. I've seen people use electrical tape for this as well. If you're not running a mudguard, you can fill in the back of your fork crown and also into the steerer tube. So you can try and bung that with something. I've seen aerosol can tops that are the perfect size for this, but also you could use a bit of electrical tape to go across that and then just cut it nicely to shape. So there's your bike ready and raring to go in the winter conditions, but don't forget your riding kit is super important as well to keep you happy and warm whilst you're riding. Winter shoes are really good. I've got these Shimano GF8s. These are actually winter flat pedal iron shoes with rubber that's designed for riding in soft conditions to stay grippy. A weatherproof layer as well is great because often the wet comes up from the trail, even if it's not raining on you. And a set of glasses paired with a mudguard keeps everything out of your eyes, and some warm gloves.